Yo, what's up, y'all? It's Cohen back here again tonight with another episode of After the Buzzer, the show where I recap the NBA games from today. We've got a lot to talk about in this video, and particularly, I kind of want to focus on the Eastern Conference. I feel like there's a lot of weird stuff happening out East. A lot of teams are really hot, and a lot of teams are definitely not. So we have a lot of things to talk about here in the Eastern Conference, and I'm going to talk about a few of those teams tonight. I'm not going to be able to talk about all of them because there are just so many teams that I want to talk about in the East. So shout out to the Hawks. They're on a big win streak. Shout out to the Hornets. They're hooping as well. Those are two teams that I really don't have time to talk about tonight, and I didn't really get to see much of those games. So shout out to those two teams for hooping at this point. Also, make sure to leave a like and subscribe if you like the NBA content. Let's see if we can hit maybe like 75, 100 likes on this video. That would be pretty dope. But going into this video, the first team that I do want to talk about are the Brooklyn Nets, beating the Boston Celtics by 19 points. It was a blowout in this game. They were up by 21 going into the fourth quarter. It was never really close in that quarter either. The Nets just are kind of showing who they are at this point. It's weird because I feel like last year the Nets got all this talk about how dominant they were and how good they were, and they're 14-5. And I feel like all I've kind of heard about is like the dysfunction of them. It just goes to show how like expected their dominance was. Kevin Durant, 21 points, 8 assists. He continues to have a great season. James Harden, who's been struggling to score the ball, 20 points, 11 assists, continuing to be a great playmaker. Not a great efficient scoring night from him, but getting 20 is what they need from him. You had 17 from Aldridge, 23 from Patty Mills, 13 from Cam Thomas. This Nets team is so much deeper than last year's team. Their off season was so good. Bringing in a guy like Patty Mills, LaMarcus Aldridge, who they could have had last season, would have been huge for that Nets team. And I gave him a shout out in my last video, but I want to give him a shout out again for how well he's been playing, coming off of what a lot of people thought, including him, was going to be a career-ending heart issue. So shout out to LaMarcus Aldridge for coming off of that, staying ready, coming into the season, and he's been really phenomenal for the Brooklyn Nets in the minutes that he's played. He's been really good, especially at this age. Cam Thomas, he was a great draft pick. Paul Millsap hasn't been anything crazy so far, but he played some decent minutes tonight with 3 and 6 and 17 minutes. The Nets offseason is just really showing when a guy like James Harden is struggling. They have guys that can pick up the slack. Patty Mills with 23 points as a starter. I think he's averaging like 18 points per game as a starter so far this season. I believe I saw a tweet about that. Maybe the tweet's wrong, but that's what I saw. So he's been hooping. And this Nets team continues to roll. They're on top of the Eastern Conference, with a couple of the other top teams in the East losing a little bit recently. The Nets are firmly on top at the moment, and they're just playing great basketball. Despite James Harden struggling, they continue to do things well, and it is a lot because of the depth that they have. This is a much deeper team than they had last season, and if Kyrie Irving ever comes back, it might be wraps for the East. I do want to give a shout out, though, to the Boston Celtics. They had a bad game in this one. Tatum was inefficient. Jaylen Brown shot 5 of 15 with only 13 points, only 15 for Tatum. Marcus Smart kind of carried them with 20 points and 8 assists. Only 10 from Dennis Schroeder, who's really been on fire recently. They just couldn't get any stops, and they weren't scoring either, so all in all, it resulted in a blowout. But the Celtics have been hooping recently. I think they're 8-4 in their last 12 now, which is huge. A big part of that does go to Jason Tatum, who has really kind of figured things out as of recently, other than this game. But I did want to give a shout out to the Celtics, who have been hooping as of late. Now, moving on to a team that is not hot, a team that is struggling through the last couple games, the Chicago Bulls, because last game they lost by 30 plus, I think it was 32 to the Indiana Pacers, and now they lost by 5, which, you know, you would think it wasn't too bad until I tell you that they lost to the Houston Rockets, who have not won in over a month, and the last team they beat was my team. So I know how it feels, Bulls fans. 5-point loss to the Houston Rockets. It's not what you want to see. 2 really bad losses back to back. They've been great. Otherwise, I don't think that these 2 losses are at all they don't indicate who this team is. This team is much better than this loss, but this is a frustrating loss if you're a Bulls fan. Losing a game like this to the Houston Rockets, you've got Nikola Vucevic back. You've got all your guys. You've got your starting lineup. Of course, you're still missing Patrick Williams, who isn't going to be back for a bit, but you've got your guys. Like, this is your team at the moment. So losing to a Houston Rockets team that's been reeling as of recently, they lost Jalen Green to injury in this game, so they didn't even have him for more than 11 minutes. It's a bad loss. And these are losses that if you're a team that wants to contend like the Chicago Bulls, you can't really have these losses, because these 2 past losses, losing by 32 to the Pacers and losing to like this to the Rockets, they could really have big implications when it comes to seeding later down the line. So these aren't the losses you want to have. They just really the big issue was that DeMar DeRozan only had 17 in this one. This was a rough game for him. Zach LaVine had 28. Lonzo Ball had 19, 5, and 5. Caruso had 15. They need to make a trade. I know that might sound crazy to say, but they need to pick someone up. I don't really love Javonte Green starting for them. He had 9 and 6 rebounds in 27 minutes. He was all right. But without Patrick Williams, I think they need to make a trade for a guy that can kind of fill that 3-and-D role for them. Who that guy is, I don't know. I also think that they're going to need a backup big at some point. I like Tony Bradley, but I don't think he can really be that backup big for them. He only played 2 minutes tonight. They've kind of got to figure that out. So I think that's one of the biggest kind of issues that they need to address over the course of this season is finding that backup big. Like I said, shout out to Thunder legend Tony Bradley and everything like that, but they need to figure that out. The Bulls are going to be perfectly fine. They're still a really good team. Just a couple things that I noticed over the course of these last couple games. And I figured out tonight that I'm a curse because looking at it, last time I dropped a video on the Timberwolves, where I was negative about them, they went on a huge winning streak. And the time before that, where I talked about them positively, they lost like 5-6 games in a row. So apparently I'm a curse. So Bulls fans, hopefully this uncurses y'all. We'll see. As for the Rockets side of the ball, like I said, getting a win, 16, 10, and 6 from Christian Wood, 14 and 9 from Kevin Porter Jr., 11 from Jalen Green in his 11 minutes, 12 from Garrison Matthews, 18 from Danuel House, who had a crazy good game, 13 from Şengün. All around team effort for the Houston Rockets. No one really kind of dominated in this one. They won this by committee, and it was a good win. This is an impressive win for the Rockets, a team that really, like I said, they were reeling. They had lost, I believe it was 15 straight at that point. Bad, really, really bad stretch. They managed to snap out of it before they got to like the 20 realm that they had last season, and I never would have guessed that they would win this game. So shout out to the Houston Rockets. And they were also kind of ahead the entire game. The way that they kind of maintained that lead rather than just kind of coming back at the last second and stealing it was impressive from this team, like I said, that has been struggling. So shout out to the Houston Rockets. As for the Bulls, really bad couple losses. They've got to figure things out. Moving on, the Detroit Pistons played the Milwaukee Bucks, and it was not fair. The Pistons got blown out by 21 points to the Bucks, who finally kind of have their guys together. They're still without Brook Lopez, but they've got Drew, they've got Chris, they've got Giannis, and with those three on the court, including Bobby Portis, who had 28 points tonight, this team's really good. They're finally coming back. I think they've won 6 in a row at this point. The Bucks are kind of showing people who they are. I knew that wasn't the Bucks team we were going to see all season. They had a really bad stretch at the beginning of the season where they weren't healthy, whether it was COVID, injuries. They're still kind of getting to that healthy level, but games like this kind of show how dominant they can be against other teams when they are at full strength. Like Jordan Nwora only played 6, he only had 2 points, and he is a really solid scorer. 11 from Pat Connaughton, 4 and 6 from George Hill. You had 22 from Drew Holiday, 28, like I mentioned, from Bobby Portis, and 10 rebounds. I almost said assists. That would be kind of crazy. 11 from Chris Middleton, 33, 7, and 5 from Giannis. This was just a dominant effort from the Bucks, who are finally getting back to who we thought and know they are, after they're kind of getting through that weird stretch of injuries, COVID-related stuff, and just everything kind of going wrong for them. They're returning towards the top of the East. Next, I want to talk about the Washington Wizards. They're a team that I praised at the beginning of the season, saying that they were for real, they were a good team, and now they're going to come out and lose by 25 to the 4-16 New Orleans Pelicans. Brandon Ingram destroyed them with 26 points, 21 and 11 for Jonas Valanciunas, who I keep forgetting is on this team. 16 and 7 from Josh Hart, 12 from Devontae Graham, 12 and 6 from Nickeil Alexander-Walker, 13 from Willy Hernangomez. The Pelicans just destroyed the Washington Wizards. They couldn't do anything. Spencer Dinwiddie's kind of going through a little bit of a rough patch scoring-wise. He did have 8 rebounds and 9 assists in addition to 11 points. 23 from Bradley Beal. It doesn't feel, they're just not playing great basketball at this point. They were playing really good team basketball is why they were getting the wins. And so when you've got a couple guys that are struggling here and there, they're just not replicating the wins that they needed to get. This loss to the Pelicans is really bad. These aren't the losses you want to have. If, like I mentioned, if you are a team like the Wizards who are trying to make the playoffs and kind of stay in that playoff picture, you can't be losing by 25 to a team like this. Kyle Kuzma struggled in this one with only 7, only 8 from Daniel Gafford, 9 from KCP. Davis Bertans is one of the worst contracts in the NBA. He is not good at all right now. Only 10 from Montrezl Harrell as well, who has been a monster for them offensively. Just a bad game for the Wizards, and they're kind of reeling a little bit right now after this one. It was not a game you want to lose. coming off of also a loss to the Hornets, one win against the Heat, and then a loss against the Heat, another loss to the Hornets, 1-4 in their last 5 games. The Wizards are kind of struggling. They've got to figure things out. So those are some of the teams in the East that are kind of up and down. Like I mentioned, I want to give a shout to the Atlanta Hawks, who are kind of on a roll, as well as the Charlotte Hornets, who are also doing big things. Also, I'm going to talk about the Sixers in a little bit, but shout to them for continuing to fight despite being really down a lot of players. But I do want to talk about the Utah Jazz and the Thunder game a little bit. This was a close one. The Thunder kept it close pretty much the entire game. I think there was like 20 plus lead changes in this game, which is insane. It was a really fun one to watch. Once again, no Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. Thunder do lose 110 to 104. Josh Giddey, 19, 7, and 8. Still waiting on that first triple-double. It's going to come soon. It's just really the rebounds, and guys aren't making the shots off of the great passes he gives them. 27 points from Luguentz Dort, who I think is now up to 17 points per game on the season, which is top 50 in the league. So his offense has really come along. 13 and 10 from Jeremiah Robinson-Earl, who continues to look like a steal in the second round. 12 from Kenrich Williams, and he didn't miss a single shot. All around, pretty solid game from the Thunder. If you're a fan that's rooting for the tank, you're rooting for a good draft pick, these are the kind of losses you want to see. Competitive, fought all the way to the end against a team like the Utah Jazz, who have the inverse of our record at 12-6, while we're 6-12, which shows you just how big the gap is. This was also a team with all their guys, so this Thunder team just showing that much fight is huge for the guys. On the Jazz side of the ball, Donovan Mitchell, Lu Dort had him in hell all game. 13, 3, and 5 from Donovan Mitchell on like 6 of 16 shooting, so it really wasn't his night. Instead, it was Rudy Gay with 15, Jordan Clarkson with 20, 18 from Mike Conley, and 19 from Bojan Bogdanovic. 15 and 17 from Rudy Gobert as well, as bigs continue to dominate the Thunder, although Lu Dort did body him on a layup, which was awesome, and Darius Bazley blocked him at the rim on a dunk attempt. So those are the 2 moral wins I'm going to take from this, as well as the performances of the other guys. The Jazz, just a much better team, but I'm proud of the squad for the way that they fought. Lakers and Pacers, this was a vintage LeBron game. LeBron pulled out the old like Punisher celebration where he does like the knee thing. You know, he hasn't done that forever. And it kind of just shows that number 6 LeBron is different, I guess. He had 39, 5, and 6 in this one. It went to overtime off the craziest Chris Duarte, like falling out of bounds. Could have even been a 4-point play, like shot attempt to tie the game. It was amazing. And I was really impressed by it. Chris Duarte, he's just one of those guys that like has the guts to take those big time shots. And more often than not, it feels like he makes them. But like I said, LeBron just kind of dominated. No Anthony Davis tonight. He was sick, I believe. 27 and 5 from Russell Westbrook, who had a decent game. 17 and 8 from Malik Monk. 14 from Melo. 14 from Wayne Ellington. But LeBron hitting like multiple, he just absolutely took over in overtime. It was a vintage LeBron type performance, hitting that classic sidestep 3 where he like looks at the ball first. I don't know why he does that. It's like the most telegraphed move ever. Like I'm watching the game from like, you know, my bird's eye view on the broadcast, and I can tell LeBron's going to shoot the 3. He knows he's going to shoot the 3, but as a defender, you can never be too sure. And then he looks at the ball and you're like, okay, he's shooting the 3. Defender still isn't sure. He shoots it and he finds a way to make it every time. Just a vintage LeBron performance, continues to play like one of the best in the world, and he's fired up after that suspension. On the Pacers side of the ball, the Pacers just stink. I don't know what it is. They're only 8-12, like it's not that bad, but for the amount of talent that the Pacers have, they should not be this bad. 16 from Justin Holiday, 14 from Domantas Sabonis, 12 from Miles Turner, 28 from Malcolm Brogdon, 10 from Karis LeVert, 17 from Chris Duarte, 10 from TJ McConnell. Like the names that I named there, this is a good team. Like those first 7 guys, those are all solid players. They've also got like a Jeremy Lamb. Of course, TJ Warren is somewhere in the abyss. Like his injury, he just doesn't ever seem to heal from. This is a really talented Pacers team, and it doesn't feel like they should be this bad. Now, putting up this fight, this is a good fight against a Lakers team, like I mentioned, with LeBron James and Russell Westbrook. Even without Anthony Davis, those are 2 really, really good players. So it's like they're still putting up a fight, but the Pacers seem to find like ways to just lose every game unless they beat the Bulls by 30 out of nowhere. The Pacers should be better than this, and I'm disappointed in them. And finally, I want to talk about the Sixers and the Golden State Warriors game. This was a close one. It was a 20-point win for the Warriors, but it wasn't that big of a lead. The Warriors went down by 20 or so in this game. The Sixers, once again, playing without Embiid or Tobias Harris, so their starting lineup of Matisse Thybulle, Tyrese Maxey, Georges Niang, Seth Curry, and Andre Drummond. They gave him a fight all the way up until the end. The Sixers continue to just make fights out of the most random assortment of guys in their starting lineup. Danny Green made his return with 10 points. 19 from Tyrese Maxey, who continues to hoop. 24 for Seth Curry in the battle against his brother Steph. Steph, like I mentioned with the win, does get the advantage, but also in the points with 25 and 10, 19 from Wiggins, 17 from Jordan Poole, 10, 9, and 7 from Draymond Green, 13 from Juan Toscano Anderson, who has been so good for the Warriors, especially like he's just one of those guys that feels like he always makes winning plays. It feels like whenever he's on the court, he's going to do something that really benefits your team. He's a role player that any team that's trying to compete for a championship like the Warriors are would love to have, and he's just a cool story. So shout out to JTA. I feel like every time he's on the court, he makes some really great plays, and he had some awesome ones in this game, 13, 6, and 6. Just one of those guys that makes winning plays as the Warriors continue to look scary. And Klay Thompson, once again, is ramping up for, I think he's doing 5-on-5 practice now, so he should be back by like Christmas, and that's when it gets really scary for the rest of the league. So shout out to the Warriors. Shout out to all the Eastern Conference teams that are doing well. Maybe you could do better to the teams that aren't doing as well. But that's all I have for this video. I appreciate y'all watching. Let me know what your takeaways were. If you made it to this point in the video, just let me know what you think about these Eastern Conference teams. Comment something below to let me know you made it this far. I appreciate y'all watching. I will see you all later. Everyone, say back.